This episode of the Hopper in the Morning Show is brought to you by our friends Ron and Terry Irish of Porterville, Russell Buck Fletcher, candidate for Porterville City Council, Elva and Fred Beltran, and local resident David Gong.
Welcome to the Hopper in the Morning Show, here at TalkToHopper.com. It's the same show, just new digs and no rules. Here's Hopper in the Morning.
This is my very first show. Good day, everyone. This is Hopper in the Morning, and you are listening to a very interesting concept. Podcast, that's what we are. What you get on this podcast over the next several years, hopefully, is going to be incredible. So spread the word on that. I think it's very apropos that my very first guest on Hopper in the Morning is the one and only PK the Redhead. Welcome, PK.
Hey.
Bet you've never seen me before.
You sound familiar.
You
sound familiar.
I sound familiar.
Keep talking. I'm sure I'll place you somewhere.
I'm sure you will. Yeah. Well, welcome anyway. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, I think it's only appropriate that you be my first guest on this brand new chapter in my life anyway. And we have been together in the broadcast industry, in the music world, even to some extent. And we've played music together. Yep. We've talked together, broadcast together. And so I wanted you to be my very first guest. Let's start out by letting people know perhaps some things that they may not have heard about PK the Redhead and Hopper in the Morning. Now, if it's all right with you, I'd like to just start from the beginning. When we first met, some of the things you might remember. And as far as I'm concerned, you can even say what station. I don't care. If they don't like it.
Too bad, so sad.
Kind of poopy.
Yeah, very poopy. Very first time I met you was at my very first radio gig 22 years ago in July last. And it was at KSEQ K100. And you and Leslie Austin were sitting on the victim side of Charlie Wolf's desk during your air check.
Did you say victim side?
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah. And I had come in to return my new hire paperwork, and you looked up at me over your left shoulder and asked if I could pee in a cup. And I went, yeah, but I kind of get some on my foot or my sock. And he said, that's okay. And then
I can't remember why I did that other than we probably had drug testing at that point.
No. And and then you said, well, you don't have to worry about it because they don't drug test DJs. So
okay.
That was just you being a smartass. That's all.
Well, that's pretty good. That's what I do really
breaking
well.
the ice.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
All right. So when you first got on the air, tell us a little bit about your first experience as a broadcaster. Were you nervous? Were you scared? What did you do?
Of course, everybody starts as a board op, and it was explained to me, if you don't learn, you will be a board operator.
Spelled differently.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was midnight to 5, and you came in, I think, at 5, so I started the coffee at 4:30 because I started it too soon once, and you made me dump it out and make another pot.
Did I really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. How long has this been on? Well, so I learned.
I do know you like yours like mud. So
yes, I do.
I understand.
Yeah. So you learn how to make things go on the air. Mm-hmm. And then after you've done that for a while, I'm telling you stuff you already know, then whoever your program director is gives you an hour or so. And this is on overnight that no sober person listens to anyway. So if you mess up, you're not really going to make anybody that angry. And then you take your air check, which at that time was a cassette tape. And
it's a while back.
Our engineer, he was so cool. I forget his name now, but
Ken.
Yes, him. He had everything wired so that when you put your cassette in and you opened the mic, it automatically recorded, which I thought that was amazing.
Of course.
Because I just didn't know anything Anyway, so I'm doing. I've got my first air check, and I come back to go over it with Charlie, and I'm thinking, ooh, I'm all that in a bag of chips, and I'm gonna get to do the whole show live, and then he just proceeds to just rip you down piece by piece by piece, and I wanted to leave crying.
Now, let me interject here that the Charlie in which PK refers to is Charlie Wolf, who was the program director at that time. So you may continue.
Our boss.
Our boss.
Yep. So then I started listening to my air check at home afterwards so that I could understand where it was coming from and listen to it a little more objectively so that it wasn't so hurtful when I'm sitting across the desk. And then eventually, it was okay, and I got to do the show, and it happened, But by very, 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 very first air shift, Willie, I think, was training me. I forget his last name, but he was a doll.
Lopez.
Yeah, okay.
First name, Domingo.
Okay.
But they called him Willie.
Yes.
Right.
I forgot how to breathe after that. There was so much that I was learning and how to make things go and pull the carts and yada, yada. And I killed my car a couple of times because at that time I had a 1980 320i BMW, and I'd forget to shift, so I kept killing the car. I was just that, and that was early morning.
Yeah.
That was midnight. The start was midnight on July 4, 1996.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember you as especially back in those days. Well, you've always been helpful, but back then you were always very helpful doing extra things that... No, you did. You were always doing extra things.
Trash.
Taking out the trash, whatever needed to be done, you did it. And a lot of us began our career like that. When I first started in broadcasting, I had to walk about about like the size of a football field, maybe a little less.
In the snow?
No, but in the cow dung, out to the transmitter site, and switch the power and make it go in a different direction, which is, this was back in Hanford, California days. So I think that was kind of interesting. So we all had to do things. Well, also what was interesting when I first started was we had an awful lot of lizards. And I don't mean lizards. I mean a lot of lizards.
Lizards.
And they would come under the doors because we were out in the middle of a field, folks.
Yeah.
And at that time, we were playing vinyl, 45s, and occasionally we had a lot of fun because the walls were kind of tacky, real thick, tacky, but you could actually stick something in it and it would stay there. So as the...
So you're saying low maintenance.
So as the lizards would crawl the walls, we would take the 45s, ones that were no longer being played, and we would have fun chopping them in half or cutting off a tail or what have you, like a Frisbee.
Yeah.
Right up against the wall.
Yep.
So these are things that people, I don't think, ever realize happen to us, illustrious broadcasters, limo waiting, mansions, all of that.
Yeah, right.
So, folks, you have heard some very interesting stuff so far on our very first podcast. Once again, we are at talktohopper.com. My first guest, PK, the Redhead. Now, let me take you back to a time, bring you a little bit more up to date. You and I were very fortunate. Well, we've had very many interviews over the years. One of the most interesting interviews that we did was with a gentleman who was, at that time, and he's again now, a Los Angeles Rams. His name, Rosie Greer.
Oh, my gosh. I was just verklempt.
That is him right there to your left. And they autographed. You have one of those as well.
I do.
It's the only thing that's allowed in this office Raider room space that is not Raiders because it is so special. Now, Rosie Greer, everybody knows Rosie Greer. Yeah. Great football player. One of the fearsome foursome. That's correct. Talk about that interview.
Okay. So we used to get a lot of information via fax at that time before everybody was doing everything via email. And occasionally you would get opportunities for public service announcement, PSA stuff. And this one had to do with prostate cancer. And the spokesperson for that was Rosie Greer. And I pulled that off the fax machine and I ran into the control room like a maniac. That's not unusual because that's usually what I did.
Correct.
And I was like, we got to do this. Can we do this? We got to do this. Please, can we go? Yeah, okay, make it happen. All right. So remember, major fangirl. And the evening before, for whatever reason, I read unusual things, but for whatever reason, I was reading an article on the increase in pancreatic cancer in women. Okay. So we're talking to Rosie.
Try to get yourself out of this.
Yeah, we're talking to Rosie about prostate cancer, and remember fangirl thing, and I will take this to my grave. And thankfully, your wife understood what I was talking about because she heard it, I think, afterwards. But I said something about your thoughts on an increase in this
prostate cancer
in women, and he was such a gentleman, and he was like. And then I said, wait a minute, I got that wrong. I'm sorry. But he was so nice. He said, well, and allowed me to correct myself. I will take that to my grave. Here I made a giant buffoon of myself in front of my football hero since I was 14 years old. Yeah.
So women do not particularly get prostate cancer because they don't have a
prostate. Yeah.
It was certainly one of those memorable occasions, folks, that we're talking about
here. But it got so much more cooler after that.
Oh, it did. Some of the things that I remember about that, which was my favorite part to talk about, but also the saddest part of that interview, was that Rosie Greer was in Los Angeles the day that RFK was assassinated, Robert Francis Kennedy. And he was going to go on and become, obviously, win the state of California in a primary in 1968, I believe.
Okay.
And then, of course, Sirhan B. Sirhan is credited, if you will, with murdering him. And then somebody shot Sirhan B. Sirhan. So Rosie Greer was involved. He stood right next to, within arm's length of Bobby Kennedy. He is the man who first wrestled this guy to the ground and had the gun taken away from him.
Rayford Johnson was there also with
Rayford Johnson. I met Rayford Johnson the first time at a thing called the West Coast Relays in Fresno.
Yeah.
My dad would take me every year. Or every time it was in the area.
Yeah, my brother competed in that.
Met Rayford Johnson. How about that? Yeah. So that was a little story, folks, that I'm glad we got to share today.
Yeah.
We were both on the line interviewing Rosie Greer. These are some of the things he said. Do you remember anything else that might be interesting in that, or did we cover that?
Well, you know, this was just supposed to be a little piece to remind men to get their prostate checked, and it turned into 20 minutes hair standing up on your arm kind of thing, because he was just walking us through everything, and it was very emotional, very unexpected, and he was just very open and honest about what happened that day, and it was memorable.
Yes,
I think you still have the CD.
Yes, thanks to you, I still have a CD. So let me move on now, folks. You're listening to Hopper in the Morning program. It's being produced by Kyle Hopper, edited by Kyle Hopper, and the idea is from Kyle Hopper.
Cool.
So I'm so happy to have my son telling me what to do.
Way to go, Possum.
Way to go, Possum. There you go. So now let's move up to modern times, if you will, and talk a little bit about, well, since then anyway, a little bit about some of the musical events that we have been a part of, that we have gone to see, and we were very fortunate being in this business of radio broadcasting and now podcasting, that we've had some fun going to see. Can you name a couple of groups that you were involved with?
Oh, I got to meet B.B. King.
Awesome.
In fact, except for his appearance I brought out all the acts. This was an outdoor concert at Tachi Palace. It was 116 degrees and bloody hot.
Oh,
it was miserable.
Yeah.
And for people to think, ooh, it's cool to hang out backstage, not so much. The sound is different. You don't get to see what's going on.
Right.
But you do get to interact with the roadies and that sort of thing. And I had my picture taken with Mr. King. He was such a nice, sweet man.
Yes.
Very, very sweet man. I think I've seen him 3 times before he passed. But the first time I had seen him, one of the roadies set me up, upstage right. I watched him on stage with him. That was like
Isn't that
nothing
something?
better.
Yeah.
And the whole show, I'm grinning like the village idiot.
Yes. Well, my turn.
Yeah, you probably got some great ones.
I will tell you one of the better ones, which I've told over and over and over again. But I want to tell this one because there might be one thing better, a little tiny bit better than being on the side watching it. And that would be being on stage at the same time. The one I'm talking about is Sammy Hagar.
Oh, yeah.
He could never drive 55.
The Red Rocker.
That's right, the Red Rocker. We got to be on stage. Having been in this business a number of years, you come to know a lot of people. Sammy was one of the coolest I'd ever met. Tom Jones was absolutely amazing. That one we were backstage and got to go to the after party.
Cool.
We kept waiting. And yes, everybody threw their panties at Tom Jones.
But you didn't.
No, I didn't wear them that night because I don't wear underwear. Now, there's some interesting things coming out on this podcast. Yeah. I think I've said it before. Yeah. Who cares? So those two are a couple of the more amazing ones, of course. And then there was the spinner guy. What's his name? 2 tickets to paradise.
Oh. Money Man.
Yeah, the Money Man.
Eddie
so
Money.
I'm hanging out backstage with Eddie Money. We're talking. He pulls up in this long Yukon black tinted glass, and these guys get out, and he walks up to me, and he goes, they said to look for a short guy. Are you a short guy? I said, do you wear glasses? Because, it's pretty obvious to me. And he goes, listen, man, you got a cigarette for the Money Man? I don't have any. And that's where that started. You got a cigarette for the Money Man? At that time, I just happened to have a cigarette for the Money Man. I don't smoke.
Not now.
But, no, many years now. So that's how we get to meet him. His famous spin, the Eddie Money spin, where he twirls around. He did it for us backstage because we had a group of people. You weren't there that night, but we did have a group of the people that we worked with at K100 now as we move on.
The other Eddie was with you for that, too.
Yes, Eddie Cruz. You might recall Eddie Cruz. Today he goes by Freddie, and his real name is De La Cruz. Brother David, a really nice bunch of nice guys. But anyway, so we did get to stick around and see, Eddie Money. He actually basically performed a little bit for us. Come on, do that spin again. Come on, man.
Give you another cigarette.
We paid you already. So it was very, very cool. Then there was ZZ Top, who was absolutely awesome when we went to see them. Got to introduce them. Leonard Skinner, one of my favorites to introduce because they would start the music.
Yeah. Well,
and then I would walk out, and on the back of my long black trench coat, I turned around to the crowd, and it said, Leonard Skinner rocks.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of fun.
There was a promo that we did before I left and went to Fresno, where we had Leon Wilkinson and somebody else, and they had just come back from touring in Alaska, and one of them had a cold or something, and they were signing the guitar that we were giving away. And wasn't it Devo and Ralph that won that guitar?
I believe. You're not thinking of Leon Russell, are you?
No.
Okay, because I remember Leon Russell more, but you're right. I believe Devo.
It was like a meet and greet in the upstairs conference.
She's referring to a couple of friends of ours, folks, so that we keep you up to date.
Yeah.
Here. So, I do remember that. So we've had, over the years, a tremendous amount of fun, opportunity to meet these folks, chat with them. That's really the bennies, as they call them, in this business, because we hadn't made a ton of money. We did all right, but we
paid the bills.
These days, paying the bills for the mansion is a little tougher. but with a little help from my friends, I'm very, very blessed, as they say, very happy, very, very happy to know that there are a lot of people out there who have contacted me regarding this podcast, possible live cast in the future, having people come in to our little studio, perhaps on the phone. Now, speaking of the phone and some of the things that we have done, you mainly, as far as calling folks.
Yeah.
Local dignitaries. Can you recall one or two that you really enjoyed speaking with? Maybe one or two that might have been the most fun for you? Because we have spoken with supervisors, and we have spoken with city council people, law enforcement, all of those.
Gosh, who was the most fun to interview? That's really tough.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's really tough.
I always enjoyed chatting with Mike Ennis.
Oh, yeah. Mike was fun, as was, but I think that was before we were doing the live Hopper chats. I was always enjoyed talking to the late Jim Maples.
Oh, Jim was cool.
He was a sweetheart.
Hoy, Jimmy, hoy.
Yeah, hoy, Jimmy,
Why you not
hoy.
fill the potholes?
And the pothole song.
Yes.
Yeah, potholes.
And the world is full of potholes. I have that somewhere, folks. We're going to have to play that on this podcast.
Somewhere along the line.
Yeah, you bet.
Trying to think. I mean, there was just...
They're all very interesting people in their own right. Eric Coyne was filled with information about filming and getting folks to come in and use our vast scenery.
A great help and great connection, too. If there was something that he couldn't, he turned me on to stuff. So
it's really hard to pinpoint one or two, isn't it?
It really is. And I can't even think of ones that I didn't like to interview.
You want me to help you? No, I won't do that because I like them all too. So
yeah.
All right. Well, then let me tell you that we are at talktohopper.com. Hopper in the Morning, that's me, my very first guest on my very first podcast show, PK the Redhead. How apropos is that? I mean, we have been together and been through a lot.
15 years, 3 months.
What? How many days was that? I mean, you're not down, huh?
Think.
Minutes, seconds?
Yeah, not
okay, fine.
All right.
Anyway, so with that being said, I'm going to let everyone know that coming in the future on this program, we will be hearing from the same people that we have had on radio air many, many times.
Cool.
In the coming weeks, I hope to have John Lawless right here, or at least by phone, because they're all busy people, so I'm hoping to get each one of them on the phone, and I hope you're listening, because you know who you are, darlings, and we're coming for you. So, everybody, John Lawless, the mayor of Visalia, Tulare, Porterville, Mayor Stowe, and a bunch of supervisors. We'll probably have Mike on a time or two before his year ends. And Amy Shucklian, these people, some of which, by the way, have already said, Hopper, I will help you.
Cool.
And everybody knows by that, I have to have some sort of financial support, not a ton of money. But I will make a pitch right here to please check my Kent Hopper Facebook page. That is not Hopper in the Morning page. That is Kent Hopper. I'm called Hopper in the Morning, but that page is still up. I've been trying to get it down. But Kent Hopper, go there on Facebook, and I will tell you how to listen to these shows, who is coming up, what we're going to do. Check this out, PK.
Okay. What?
In the future, very near future, I hope to have local talent, mainly singers who sing mellow,
Okay.
guitarists, come in and perhaps showcase them a little bit throughout Tulare County.
Cool.
And throughout the world, actually, because when you're on talktohopper.com, you can listen anywhere in the world.
Anywhere?
Anywhere. On your computer. Forthcoming, we will be advising our listeners, my listeners, where they can download certain apps, what apps we're going to be using. Remember, folks, this is the very first show, Hopper in the Morning, with PK the Redhead joining me as my first guest. Well, PK, I won't keep you. I know that you have a busy schedule now that neither one of us are employed.
Actually, it is.
As far as a radio station.
Yeah.
Oh, I know you are.
Yeah.
Do you have, finally, this is my final question for you. Do you have anything to say without, and I say this with all due respect to where we have worked for many years, do you want to say anything about our past employer and what has happened?
I think it was very gutless the way we were told that the station had changed hands, presuming that he presumed that we already knew, which we did not.
Yeah.
And I thought that was wrong. And just, doctors don't make good business people.
Apparently.
Yeah. They just don't. So
I wish them the best. I know that the doctor you refer to has lost his wife, who I really, I think the whole radio station thing was her dream, not his.
It was, yeah.
But it had to go on, and it did for a while. So I hope that new owners come in and do good things for the community. I can tell you this. This man right here, Hopper in the Morning, and I know Kyle, my producer, we will make sure that this community, and I mean Tulare County community, is covered one way or another.
Cool.
So, PK, I want to thank you for coming and being on my first show. I seriously mean that.
Cool.
I do.
Thank you, darling.
I'm so glad you came.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you for being with us, folks. This will conclude our very first podcast of this year. Very first one. I want to thank Kyle for helping me put this all together and scrounging up what he needs to get it together.
We're used to that.
I'm very, very happy. Better known as
the Possum.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for being with us. TalkToHopper.com out.
You've been listening to Hopper in the Morning on TalkToHopper.com. We thank you for your support and contribution to this project.
This episode of the Hopper in the Morning Show has been brought to you by Ron and Terry Irish of Porterville, Russell Buck Fletcher, candidate for Porterville City Council, Elva and Fred Beltran, and local resident David Gong.